Hello, my name is Adam Williams, and you are listening to a short-form version of Retail Redeveloped. Now, I'm going to talk about something extremely timely today. Today's podcast is called Rents Due, but Are Retailers Paying? It could also be called More Questions Than Answers. It could also be called Occupancy Costs, Back to the Drawing Board. We're all trying to figure out ways to figure things out, including rent, in a very unprecedented time. In the time of COVID, retailers are shut down and consumers are staying home under stay-at-home orders that are slowly being lifted. And we are very close to another first of the month when it's landlord's favorite day of the month because rent is due. There's been many questions circulating about how retailers are going to pay rents, what are going to happen to furloughed employees, and how are basically people going to pay their bills in a very odd time. Let's go back to the history books of the last couple months. Urban Outfitters publicly said what many retailers are discussing behind closed doors, that, we're not going to pay rent. In the middle of financial measures, Urban said it was taking, while their stores are closed, would include furloughed employees and the suspension of all rent payments. Cheesecake Factory also announced that they will not be paying rent on any of their leases. Starbucks basically just came out and said they're not paying rent until they damn well feel like it. This is not new, and I get the sense that it's going to continue for a little while. Landlords, on the other hand, might not see rent as optional even during a pandemic. In fact, one major retail landlord, Taubman, owner of malls across the country, told tenants that it is still expecting rent payments even with most of the operators' malls closed to the public. Now, these are opening up as we speak. Simon has opened. A lot of the other big boys have opened. So this is playing out in real time right now. There's no real playbook for what is happening in retail right now. Retailers closing tens of thousands of stores, business and governments trying to slow the spread of COVID without money coming in from store sales. Chief importance is stop burning cash and keep flexibility. Retailers have been drawing on their credit lines, but they're also taking a very hard look at expenses. Obviously, these big expense costs are rent, wages, and vendor payments. All those things are under a microscope at major retailers, and some have already made painful cuts to staff and wages. Cuts to rent and vendor payments are coming as well. All of that means that the pain is going to be shared up and down the stakeholder chain. Now, this is going to include everybody from debt holders, equity holders. I'm already being told that banks are starting to scrutinize a lot of their paper, starting to make calls to replace sponsorship, to take some pretty drastic measures. Now, the size of the rent burden in terms of cash and ranking on the cost structure depends on the specific retailer. For just basic retailers, occupancy cost as rent is usually about 10% of sales. Sometimes it can be a little lower. Obviously, if people are wildly successful, it's going to be lower. Some retailers see no other choice but to skip this rent. Consumers aren't shopping online in the same way they were in stores for some of these retailers, for many of these retailers. And many retailers still feel an uncertainty around when they can reopen their doors and what are the percentage of people coming through those doors once they do reopen. Retailers and landlords are carefully looking at their leases to see what can be done around rent abatement, delayed payments, skipping payments altogether, force majeure clauses, many things like that. While many industries are thriving, including grocery, drugstores, Target, Walmart, home improvement retailers, many have been forced to close. And from what I'm hearing, 30% of those retailers, including restaurants that you might know and love, aren't going to reopen. One notable circumstance is the widespread closure of malls where retailers operate. Taubman, Simon, Washington Prime, CBL, many of these places have closed these malls across their portfolio, and other malls have been forced to close by state or local non-essential business regulations. In cases where the mall is closed, retailers might look to language in many leases that obligates landlords to pay and provide a functional space like quiet enjoyment, things like that, where retailers can properly operate. Retailers might also point to co-tenancy clauses, which can stipulate rent abatement or alternate rent payments when mall anchors like department stores or other key tenants close their stores. This is going to get very murky. The only people that are going to benefit from this are probably corporate counsel whose meters are going to be running at overtime levels. Retailers and landlords alike have plenty to lose in this situation, along with public announcement from retailers like Urban and Cheesecake, many negotiations going on behind the scenes. Landlords are looking for disclosures on income, P&L statements, losses. They basically want to get in these retailers' books to see how bad the business is and is there a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, obviously, law is going to play a role. Rent might be made as a business decision for retailers and landlords alike. One question I have, we base a lot of these leases on occupancy costs. If these businesses are only allowed to open at 50% occupancy, there's no way their top line sales are going to be anything like what they were before COVID, at least for the time being. So does a 10% occupancy cost turn into a 20% occupancy cost? And how are these guys going to stay in business? In my mind, co-tenancy, keeping the lights on, and kind of joining hands with your best retailers and trying to figure out how to get through this thing is probably the smartest order of the day, even if it provides a really, really painful discussion with your equity partners. The pressure is going to be extended to vendors. As I said earlier, retailers are trying to manage cash flow. Once retailers open again, they'll find themselves in a position to sell off inventory they had prior to the shutdowns, and there's probably going to be a lot of deals to be had for the consumers. Obviously, we're living in unprecedented times. The community at large has found a way to try to come together to create beneficial solutions. I've seen a tremendous amount of community support for small businesses. I've seen brilliant moves by businesses to pivot and go from selling inside their doors to off-premise delivery, buy online, pick up in store, curbside service. It's been very, very interesting. We're obviously going to see a lot of retailers make public statements about when their rent is going to be paid, how creditors are going to get paid, are they halting rent payments on any or all of their properties, and what is that going to look like as they reopen. Have you heard retailers and landlords discuss rent abatement? I'd love to hear from you guys. How has this affected retailers and landlords in your communities or your clients? Leave a comment in the discussion page. And if you have any ideas on mutually beneficial strategies that you have been a part of to deal with COVID shutdowns or policies that you think should be put into place in leases going forward, I'd love to hear about it. Once again, Adam Williams, Retail Redeveloped. Thank you for listening.